Welcome to Toxic HOA, the channel where we expose the corruption, lies, and greed inside America's most toxic homeowners associations. If you believe in standing up for your rights and your home, hit that subscribe button now, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. It started on a chilly Thursday morning in early March. I stepped outside with a mug of coffee in hand, as I always did, ready to take in the quiet beauty of my 150-year-old home, a stone cottage nestled at the edge of a small town in Virginia, standing tall on land my great-great-grandfather once farmed. It had survived 2 world wars, 4 hurricanes, and decades of weathering. But I never thought the biggest threat to this house, this symbol of heritage, would come from a neighborhood HOA, especially one I wasn't even a part of. Taped to my front door was a yellow piece of paper, not from the town, not from the tax office, but from something calling itself the Hilldale Preserve Homeowners Association. It said I owed them $3,480 in unpaid community fees, plus a $900 compliance fine. And if I didn't pay in full within 30 days, they'd place a lien on my property. I stood there for a full minute, blinking at the page like it was written in another language. I wasn't in an HOA, never signed anything, never received any welcome packet or rule book, so how could I owe anything? At first I thought it was a scam, some new trick targeting seniors or longtime property owners like me. But when I called the number listed on the letter, a very real and very aggressive man answered. He introduced himself as Mr. Carville, HOA Board President, and told me plainly that my house had been absorbed into the Hilldale Preserve HOA under expanded jurisdiction after a recent vote. He said I was now legally bound by the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the community. I told him, flat out, that I had never joined any HOA, and that this was my private property. He laughed. "You'll want to speak with your attorney then, Mr. Jensen," he said, before hanging up. So I did exactly that. My lawyer, Paul Richardson, reviewed the documents and shook his head. "They're trying to backdoor you into their association," he said. "HOAs can't just claim property unless something happened at the zoning level." So we dug deeper, and what we found was jaw-dropping. 2 months prior, the Hilldale HOA had filed a zoning petition with the County Planning Commission. In it, they included my property, along with 3 others, under what they called an expanded landscape boundary, citing community visual cohesion as the reason. What that meant was they claimed that even though my property wasn't part of their neighborhood, it looked close enough to be included. They argued it was in the visual scope of the Hilldale community, and used that to justify a silent expansion. There was no notice, no mail, no vote. No one from the town even questioned it, just rubber stamps and quiet approvals. I realized something terrifying that day. This wasn't about community improvement. It was about control and money. Someone wanted my land, and they were using the HOA as a tool to take it. After the initial shock wore off, I realized I needed to dig, hard and fast. Something about this whole situation stank. This wasn't just some overzealous HOA trying to get me to trim my bushes. This was orchestrated, calculated. The kind of thing people don't notice until they're already in court or out of their homes. My first step was to pull the public zoning records. Anyone can access them. They're buried in the county archives, but they're there. Sure enough, I found the document. A zoning petition filed by the Hilldale Preserve Homeowners Association. It was long, full of legal jargon, but the key language was buried right on page 6. They requested that the county redraw the neighborhood boundary lines to maintain neighborhood continuity and property value alignment. Sounds harmless, right? Until you realize what that really means. Absorbing nearby land under HOA control. The new map they submitted clearly looped in my land. Not just my house, but my whole lot, including a 30-foot strip that leads down to the creek behind my barn. This strip had been in my family for generations, a place where my grandfather used to fish, a piece of heritage, and now, on paper, it belonged to them. At least, that's what they were trying to push. I brought the documents to my attorney. Paul leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "We've seen this before. HOAs pulling fast ones with zoning commissions. But the difference here is, you're not part of the original HOA. That gives us some leverage." But even so, the damage was already underway. A week later, I received another letter, this time from a law firm, Marston and Keene LLP, representing Hilldale Preserve HOA. The letter declared that I was in violation of multiple HOA code clauses, including non-approved paint color on exterior trim, failure to submit a landscaping plan, presence of unregistered structures, my barn, which had been there for 70 years. They demanded immediate compliance and back payments on HOA dues going back 18 months, totaling nearly $5,800. Or else, they would initiate lien enforcement and legal seizure of property under HOA charter law. I couldn't believe it. They were trying to rewrite the past, retroactively applying rules I never agreed to, rules they just decided I now had to follow. Even worse, my neighbors, many of whom I'd known for years, started pulling away. I got the cold shoulder at the grocery store. Cars slowed down outside my driveway. Someone reported me for unauthorized equipment storage because I left my tractor parked in view. It was clear the HOA was working to alienate me, turn the community against me, and break me down until I gave up the fight. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to fold. This house wasn't just property, it was my legacy. And now, it was a battleground. Things were moving fast. Too fast. Within just 2 weeks of receiving the first lien notice, I had already been buried in legal letters, phone calls, and threats of court action. And still, I hadn't stepped foot in a single HOA meeting, hadn't signed any HOA documents, and had never agreed to their rules. I was watching my life get hijacked through paperwork and intimidation, and I wasn't the only one. One afternoon, I got a message from an unknown number, just a text. "I work for the HOA management company. I've seen what they're doing to your property. I don't agree with it. Meet?" At first I assumed it was a prank, but then a second message followed with a screenshot, an internal HOA email thread between Tanya Reeves, the Hilldale HOA treasurer, and a rep from Marston and Keene law firm. The subject? Priority enforcement, Jensen property. The email made my blood run cold. Once the lien sticks, developer plans to offer buyout. Keep pressure high. Use historic nuisance angle if needed. Buyout? Developer? They weren't trying to fine me into compliance. They were trying to make me sell. I agreed to meet the whistleblower the next day at a coffee shop in the next town over. Her name was Mara Callahan. She worked for Sundridge Community Management, the third-party firm that handled Hilldale's HOA operations. Mara was in her early 30s, sharp and clearly nervous. "I could lose my job for this," she said. "But what they're doing is wrong. This isn't about dues. It's about your land." Mara explained that 6 months ago the Hilldale HOA began a secret deal with Suncrest Properties, a real estate developer looking to expand luxury townhomes along the creekside. The developer had approached several HOA boards across the county, offering incentives, kickbacks, really, in exchange for assisting with land acquisition. That's where I came in. My property sat right on the edge of the planned development. The HOA's goal was to absorb my land under their jurisdiction, fine me into default, then use the lien to force a sale or take possession. Once the lien matured, it would be flipped to Suncrest at a deep discount. They had done this before. quietly. 2 blocks over, a retired couple had their small lot seized by the HOA over a non-compliant pergola. It was bulldozed 6 weeks later and turned into part of a parking structure. But unlike them, I wasn't going to be quiet. Armed with Mara's info, I had real ammunition, internal emails, memos, HOA meeting transcripts, proof of collusion. My attorney filed for an injunction to freeze the lien. At the same time, we sent a formal notice of legal intent to both the HOA and Suncrest Properties, accusing them of property fraud, abuse of zoning statutes, and unlawful jurisdictional overreach. That's when the harassment really began. My mail started arriving, opened. HOA members sat parked across the street from my house late at night. A compliance officer showed up and took pictures of my windows, but I knew something they didn't. I had started recording everything. With the documents Mara provided and my lawyer's aggressive filings, we finally got a temporary injunction to stop the lien from being enforced, at least for now. That legal win gave us breathing room. But we needed more than just paperwork. We needed public pressure. That's when I decided to go fully public with my story. I sat down and filmed my first full-length video for the channel. I laid it all out: the absorption of my property, the lies, the hidden developer deal, the whistleblower evidence. Within 2 weeks, the video hit 93,000 views. People in the comments were furious. Some had similar stories. Some were ex-HOA board members spilling secrets. Others were homeowners who finally realized what was happening in their own neighborhoods. The media came next. A local investigative reporter named Lien Ortiz reached out after watching the video. She worked for the Channel 5 News I-team and wanted to do a segment. I agreed, and together we went public on TV. She brought cameras to my property. We showed the historic deed, the hand-built barn, the bogus HOA fines. The piece aired during the 6 o'clock news under the title, "Hijacked by the HOA, How One Man Fought to Keep His Land." That same night, I got a call from another homeowner, 2 streets over, who said their property had been targeted by Hilldale Preserve in the same way, only they'd paid the fines out of fear. They were scared, elderly, and felt helpless. I told them to call Paul, my lawyer. Their story added fuel to our case. Meanwhile, the HOA was scrambling. Tanya Reeves, the treasurer, filed a counterclaim, accusing me of defamation, public disorder, and even trespassing on my own property. They claimed I had harassed board members by filming them. Total nonsense. But it backfired. Our legal discovery unearthed emails and meeting minutes that revealed just how deep this conspiracy ran. HOA board members had discussed strategic absorption tactics and listed properties by name. One note even joked, "The Jensen place will make a perfect walkway to the new condos." That line alone lit the courtroom on fire. When the hearing finally began, the judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Valerie Monroe, immediately questioned how a private HOA could assume authority over a property without recorded consent or a signed covenant. Their attorney fumbled. He tried to argue proximity and community visual integrity, but Judge Monroe wasn't buying it. "You cannot legislate aesthetics into legal ownership," she snapped. The crowd in the courtroom, mostly local residents, some from my YouTube audience, clapped. The HOA's lawyer asked the judge to reprimand them. She refused. The judge issued a preliminary ruling that blocked the HOA from issuing any further fines, fees, or liens against my property. She also ordered the county zoning board to produce every document related to the expansion request. This wasn't a full victory, but it was a turning point. We had exposed the scheme, we had the law on our side, and now the people were watching. After the judge's ruling halted the lien and froze the HOA's bogus authority over my property, it felt like a huge weight lifted. But I knew this fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. We hadn't defeated the machine, we'd only exposed the gears. Within a week of the ruling, Three unexpected things happened. First, two HOA board members resigned. Quietly. No press releases, no explanations. Just gone. One of them was the vice president, who had reportedly been pushing for the most aggressive fines. The other, a board secretary, was replaced almost overnight. Someone tipped me off that both had been involved in email chains related to developer kickbacks, and they left before legal investigators could subpoena them. Second, my property became a battleground of a different kind. Someone dumped bags of garbage in my driveway. My mailbox was smashed with a bat. The barn door was spray-painted with the words, "Liar," and "Pay your dues." Of course, there were no security cameras on that side of the house, something they must have known. I reported everything to the sheriff, but nothing came of it. No arrests, no leads. Just a note in a file. But I wasn't about to be intimidated. In fact, I did the opposite. I filmed the damage, posted it on Toxic HOA, and titled the video, "They vandalized my 150-year-old home. This is how HOA bullies retaliate." It hit 150,000 views in 2 days. The comments exploded. People were angry. Some were scared. Dozens of homeowners sent me private messages telling me they'd faced similar harassment after refusing to comply with insane HOA demands. A woman from Florida had her garden torn out by an HOA crew. A man in Texas lost his home over unpaid sidewalk fees. This wasn't a local issue. It was national. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to just fight for myself. I was going to use my platform to help others. With help from Paul and Mara, the brave whistleblower, I started building a network. We called it Homeowners Against Abuse, a simple site, a community forum, and a free legal resource list. Within the first week, over 700 people signed up, and every day, new stories rolled in, some worse than mine. Meanwhile, back at home, the Hilldale HOA tried one last desperate move. They filed a petition to the county, claiming I was a historic non-compliant structure that didn't meet modern code, and therefore should be condemned. Yes, you read that right, condemned. Their goal? Force the county to declare my property uninhabitable, then sell it off under redevelopment necessity. But the public was watching now. Channel 5 News aired a follow-up segment titled, "Preserve or Destroy." HOA targets 150-year-old home with condemnation attempt. This time, the backlash was immediate. A local preservation society got involved. Historians reached out. Petitions circulated. Over 20,000 people signed to protect my home from demolition. Suddenly, the county backed off. Fast. They issued a statement saying they had no current plans to reevaluate zoning or condemnation of the Jensen property. Translation? They knew they'd been caught in the crossfire of something shady and wanted out. So now the HOA was cornered. No liens, no condemnation, no legal teeth left. But I wasn't done. After surviving months of liens, harassment, court hearings, and failed intimidation tactics, I finally had a chance to confront the real puppeteer behind it all. Suncrest Properties, the developer who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. The civil lawsuit we filed named both the HOA and Suncrest for fraudulent intent to acquire land through improper legal mechanisms, collusion, and malicious abuse of process. The judge granted discovery, which meant our legal team could now demand internal emails, contracts, zoning proposals, and more. What we found? Absolute gold. Emails between Suncrest executives and Hilldale HOA board members outlined the entire plan. They even referred to my home, my historic 150-year-old home, as Lot 9B acquisition phase. They called the barn an obstruction and suggested a timeline for clearing it. There were even notes about the expected increase in unit value once the lot was absorbed into their high-end townhouse development. But the worst part? a signed understanding agreement between Tanya Reeves and a Suncrest vice president, promising her a consulting fee upon successful transition of land assets. That was a bribe in plain sight. We filed a motion to bring all of it to light in court. The courtroom was packed the day of the hearing. Local press, community members, even a few quiet allies from other neighborhoods who had seen the same tactics used in their own HOAs. I walked in with Paul, Mara by our side, and a folder of evidence that could bring the whole house of cards crashing down. Suncrest's lawyers tried to argue that it was all standard procedure, just a developer working with willing community organizations to improve the area. But when the judge saw the timeline of internal memos, she stopped them mid-sentence. This was not standard procedure, she said. This was a coordinated attempt to strip a citizen of their property through deceptive legal action. The courtroom went silent. That moment, that exact moment, I knew we had them. The judge ruled in our favor. She invalidated the lien, declared the HOA's jurisdictional extension over my property illegal, and ordered a cease and desist on any further action by Hilldale Preserve regarding my land. She referred the case to the State Attorney General's office for further investigation into potential racketeering activity. Suncrest pulled out of the project 2 days later. The next week, the Hilldale HOA board was dissolved by a vote of the remaining residents. Tanya Reeves, disbarred from future HOA leadership and under investigation for bribery and fraud. And my house, still standing, still mine.